shrouded in a spider web of lies. Isn't this America? Or is this America all a lie?
Of the freedom of speech, somewhere I read. Of the freedom of press, somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
How can I pledge allegiance to a country built on lies? Or raise my children to believe they're equal in its eyes? My leaders are assassinated for speaking their mind. So justice never tilts my way. I thought that she was blind. Isn't this America? Or is this America all a lie?
Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop.
Good day. I am Denise DePina-Reed, co-host of At the Round Table with MAMLEO, a Massachusetts Association Minority Law Enforcement Officers Incorporated broadcast. And we greatly appreciate our sponsors, John B. Cruz Construction Company, 1 John Elliott Square, Roxbury, Massachusetts.
I wish that I could freely dream and be judged from within, haunted by a power that cannot see past my skin. My views are viewed as...
Wow. All right, welcome back to the final hour at the Round Table with Man. I'm your host, Larry Ellison, in studio with my brother. Dr. Bradley is in the house, giving you a checkup from the neck up. Good morning, sir.
And all this, am I okay? And all is well.
All is well.
All is well.
All right. It's good to be seen. It's good to be
seen.
All right, welcome back to At the Round Table with MAMLEO. Final hour. Dr. Bradley, can you believe the 2 hours?
I can't be.
We were so tired, folks said the rebroadcast. We just needed to take a break for a second here.
I don't think I'm on.
I think all right, there we go.
Yeah, I think I'm there. Okay, I don't believe it, man. He's like, my God, we're already through that hour.
Well, hopefully the Army and Navy game goes as quick so I can get back to normal in my town.
I hear that, and hopefully that the Army Navy game with the Army dominating, as I know they will.
Okay.
And I'll be sending you a text as we score our touchdowns.
Okay, all right. Well, see, now I'm conflicted because I have friends on both sides now.
I mean, just stay neutral, dog.
Okay.
You just stay neutral.
I'll call me Switzerland for the day. Well, it's funny. I said I couldn't have scripted that more if I had said, all right, I'm going to have someone from Army and Navy here.
I yield to the counselor. He did do more time in military than I was there for 4 years. He was there for 23. But still, the Army is the better service. It's the oldest.
Yes.
All right. At one point, we only had one person in the military, and that was Washington.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
And he happened, absolutely. He was actually coming to Boston to review the Army when right before during the Battle of Bunker Hill.
Okay.
By the way, or Beast Hill was where it really happened.
Okay.
And he was here to actually review it. You know,
right.
So at one point, it was only one person in the Army. It was George Washington.
Wow. And you...
The beginning.
And that's
the
circle minute. That's a minute, boy. I appreciate you because you come with a wealth of knowledge here. Sometimes that's why you need that yin and that yang. I appreciate it. Absolutely. We want to thank our sponsor, Guarantee Rate Mortgage Company. For all your mortgage needs, give branch manager Cora Holbrook a call at area code 781-342-0252. Guarantee Mortgage is located at 75 State Street in downtown Boston, Mass. Guarantee Rate Mortgage Company, guaranteed to exceed your expectation. I said, what a pack show this morning, Dr. Bradley. It was
what amazes me is that people calling so early in the morning.
Well, I think people are engaged and they want to hear it, and they like the opportunity to be.
Yeah, but usually they don't get. Usually we get this kind of activity after 8 o'clock,
right.
at the 8 o'clock hour, not from 7 to 8.
Yeah, that's because we took last week off.
Oh, I hear you. Everybody was okay. Everybody's like, I'm gonna get these guys.
Pent up. It's pent up. Like I said, I want to thank City Council President Ed Flynn for dropping by. In fact, he's going his way. He's to the Army Navy game. He's a Navy guy, Dr. Bradley Army. So I want to thank him for coming in with that updates on the council. He's actually trying. But I think we have on the line currently our next guest from the other side of town, from Senator Nick Collins. Are you there, Senator?
Yes, sir. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm gonna call you Senator because I listening artist, but I call you a friend. I was just saying, as well as Councilor Ed Flynn, I consider a friend. You know, people have official titles, but you guys are not people who actually go around with that on your shoulder. You just common. Your dad, your family are friends to me, more like family. Honestly, you know, when I call the Collins family, the Flynn family, I get a response. You know, you guys have shown me that this whole stereotype, Dorchester, South Boston, are enemies of the other side of the town. It is not true.
We're all Boston, man.
It is not. But
We're all Boston.
people try to sell that, and all that sells is division,
Yes.
right? Because we don't take the opportunity. So I just wanted to say thank you, Senator, for all you have done over the years. Like I said, since I've gotten to know you when you were running for the first time for the Senate, thought you were the best person for that seat. And now that you have been in that seat, you have exceeded the expectations that I had, and you don't get credit enough, and I'm not just saying for the work that you do behind the scenes, keeping your constituents, keeping us informed about what's going on at the State House as well as in the community. And there's not a time I've called you, and it's true what you say about the Collins family. You buy one, you get two free. So his brother and his dad are always, so I mean, you definitely have it in the DNA. So I just wanted to flag that and say thank you. And how is the family doing? Because it's growing. It's grown since we first met.
Yes, it has. Well, thank you for those kind words. We'll be getting our Christmas tree today, so that's always fun.
It's hard to find them, right? Because it would say there's a shortage or that. So good luck.
We'll be on a scavenger hunt for probably half the day, but
good luck.
we will not take no for an answer.
Right. Well, thank you for taking some time this morning.
Thank you. And Larry, first of all, thank you for your leadership. I mean, I don't think most people know this. I don't know too many people that were probably willing and able to get elected president of their class in the early 80s at South Boston High School from the African American community, given all the turbulence across the city in the aftermath of the beginning of desegregation. And so, that speaks volumes. You don't. Your career speaks for itself. The victories that you've won for the members, we'll speak about that in a minute. But I mean, that's an embodiment of someone who is not only willing to reach out and build relationships, but do it sometimes in the face of difficult circumstances. So kudos to you and your family.
Well, I thank you for that, Council. But this is where a continuing of that. This way, I say this. I like you. I see people. I know what they look like, and I think if we get past that and just evaluate the person, because we find that ignorance and stupidity comes in all colors, shapes, forms. So I thank you for those kind words as well. So I just wanted to, pick up on a few things you talked about before we speak about the settlement that was finally approved in the legislature for the MAMLEO officers. That I want to speak about a couple of things, and that shouldn't have taken as long as it did, but we'll speak about that. But another hard-fought and a successful piece of justice that you've delivered in your team, Jeff Lopes, and the folks in your attorneys and the board and the committee. I know that President Lopes was, pushing me, making sure the legislature wasn't causing any further delay, given that it was in our supplemental budget that had a whole host of things in there. But the fact that was in there and the advocacy of MAMLEO made sure we didn't rest until it was done, because there were a lot of important things in there, and this was one of them. But just on the job training stuff, you talked about T. Michael Thomas's program and then some of the others. I think what's
incredibly important to know is that quarterly the Neighborhood Jobs Trust meets quarterly to dole out funding for programs like this. And all the things that programs like the People's Academy and other programs like it that are able to bring the community to the table for job training and pathways to high-paying job opportunities is all doable to fund this. I mean, in one regard, there's a quarterly process. In another regard, when it comes to development across the city, the permitting process gives us a roadmap, a runway. We have a period of time when we know there's a permitting process. In the aftermath of construction, during construction, we have, up front, we have, construction jobs, as the council president pointed out, that need to be going more to Boston residents, and particularly communities of color, but also, programs that we should be able to fund through Madison Park that's struggling. And we know in 2 years, after the period of construction, they need building management teams. They need diagnostic folks that are all, whether it's through the community colleges or Madison Park, it's a no-brainer. And we're just not staying focused on that. And I think that's the key. You don't just wake up in the morning and these things happen. This is why people get elected to office, to focus on this stuff, pay attention to it, and deliver on it. And the same with things like the liquor license bill that's coming up, to make sure we're not missing the boat, so to speak. But we're very proud of our record to bring Black businesses to the seaport since I've been in office, whether it's the first hotel of its kind and size in the Omni Seaport Hotel. Let's get Black ownership, small businesses that are getting retail opportunities and being prioritized for Black restaurants, and that requires Black licenses. So with this debate around the liquor license expansion, which is before us on Beacon Hill and was dealt with at the City Council, we're trying to make sure that we don't miss the boat here. MAMLEO, for instance, that facility should have a license. Other disadvantaged businesses should be able to access licenses in high-value in tourist areas like the Seaport and Back Bay, areas that I represent. So we want to make sure that legislation includes those, not just increased licenses for the communities and the neighborhoods, which is important to have vibrancy there, but for the community and the businesses, but for also not leave them out of high-value opportunities that are coming with the tourist areas in places like the Seaport and Back Bay that deserve a mix and need a mix of businesses. So we're not losing out on those opportunities where we have hungry entrepreneurs, no pun intended, in the restaurant industry who are going to bring unique businesses to places like that right now are Anywhere USA.
Right.
So those are some things that we're focused on, but it requires us to stay focused because, like I said, all this is doable, from ensuring grants to organizations that are ready to get people to work, and job opportunities and pathways that are timed and aligned, as we do have the runway to see the forest through the trees. But we have to do a better job as elected officials to pay attention to that, stay attentive to it,
but
the stuff that matters, not the divisive distractions that have dominated debate in our city and sometimes our state for too long.
Well, see, that's what I'm saying, Senator. And I want to think, because you've been intentional, and this is what I say, is that there has always been a line of communication. I know since I was president of Maryland, since I first met you, when you were our state rep. And even when there were issues that did not impact, as well as what I was saying with City Councilor Ed Flynn, that did not impact your district, you guys are very helpful in helping. And since you've stepped into that role as a senator, you didn't forget about the other side of town that you represent, and even beyond that. And that's where I think folks are lacking a lot, is that they kind of are in these bubbles or these silos if it doesn't impact their constituents or even certain constituents in their area. Because, as you alluded to and Dr. Bradley said, the Seaport, that place, I was just down there the other day. We were staging for the president's visit here. And it was, since the last time I was there was maybe 2 years ago, it was unrecognizable, the growth that's going on there. And you're right, it's very prosperous, because what is the state, I know Dr. Bradley wants to say, the state's budget is somewhere in 56 billion with the B dollars. That's not that's the economics of some small country, more than some countries.
No, exactly. No, and there's more opportunity that can be accessed, and part of that is through our quasi-state agencies like Massport, who's done a decent job.
Mm-hmm.
They can do better. The convention center that has failed, and they need to be reformed. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about the settlement, the $40 million settlement won by MAMLEO and their
I returned. Yeah, and as a matter of fact, Dr. Bradley is over here smiling because his wife is one of the recipients of that. Even though she's retired, he's over there now ordering stuff.
Well, I personally, Senator, and all the other senators who are actually politicians who agreed to this, I do thank you for your hard work on this. My wife was a police officer. She retired, and she was one who was very reluctant to take the exam because she felt that the exam had absolutely no bearings on what we did as supervisors on the police force. But I talked her into taking this particular exam, and she took it. But Latin grad, extremely intelligent, didn't do well enough to meet the Boston Police standard. So I just appreciate the fact that the money is one thing, but the fact that you're looking at this and saying, hey, listen, this is wrong.
Right.
And making a change for the future of the police department is where I'm going with this.
And absolutely. And before you respond to the Senator, this is what I'm saying is that these are the type of things where normally there wouldn't have been this type of cooperation and acknowledgement that there was a wrong, because the normal posturing was always to continue to fight. And the city has still done a lot of that, unfortunately, in dragging this out. And with the support and the help on your leadership and a few others, we were able to say, you know what, this is the court's decision. This population, as Judge said very clearly, that you've been discriminated against these folks for over 50 years. You guys didn't say, well, the Attorney General, now the current governor, and even the current AG could have picked up the ball and said, we're going to appeal this and drag this out even longer. You guys said enough is enough, and I appreciate that. But that comes from working with people and understanding the folks and knowing that they have a legitimate case and a legitimate argument because we've been having these conversations over the years.
Well, and I got to give credit, of course, where it's due, Governor Healy and Attorney General Campbell really stayed on this. Yeah. And what I find striking, Doctor, and Sue was preemie to your wife, I'm a Latin school grad myself, proud to say it, that in the ruling, the judge, was particularly pointed about that the HRD Human Resource Division had ignored its own internal findings. I mean, they did their own division. Yep, we screwed up, and then they still, ignored them. So, I think that the his quote that sticks out is this is quotable. The false appearance of a fair process created by inaccurate beliefs and created unwarranted expectations among candidates and appointing authority, perpetuating a discriminatory system that has injured qualified candidates and deprived the public of the benefits of having the best qualified police sergeant. Says it all. But the process that I want to speak to about how it got paid out. So the delay, from when the decision was made early this spring, is one that I think is an important one. Not that it should have been delayed beyond our informal session dates of November 15th, which gives us a lot to think about and a lot to chew on as it relates to how we can do better in the legislature. But the process is important the way it is. And is it reformable? Probably. But unlike the quasi-public agencies like the MCCA, who are able to shield their misdeeds by buying discrimination insurance on themselves using taxpayer dollars so they settle quietly without the legislature or even their board knowing. And this is something as chair of the Committee on State Administration and Regulatory Oversight, we're going to be looking into in an oversight hearing, hopefully in January, and proposing legislation, looking into these practices to change.
Senator,
reform legislation.
Senator, I wanted.
Here's the deal. Just because, sorry, please. That the process is you get a settlement and you get a judgment for regular state agencies, like in this case HRD. You have to disclose that to the comptroller's office. We then have to, and you make a request for the funding. It then has to get approved by the legislature, and then that's submitted to a report to the committees on Ways and Means and the clerk, so the public knows what's going on. So there's a shaming in a way for the behavior of these state agencies that perform the discriminatory practice. So the public can say, "Oh, really?" So folks who are part of that can say, "Yeah, we got to change practice. We have to do better," because there's an accountability in shining a light. So, our goal is to bring those practices for the quasi-public agencies, like the Convention Center Authority, out from the shadows and into the light, so people know what's going on and that behavior changes.
Well,
that's key. So I apologize for the delay in the appropriation. However, the process is important because of the public nature of it.
Right. And the reason I was interrupting you because I wanted people to hear what you said, and if you could repeat what you said about the purchase of insurance for discrimination.
Yeah, I mean, I can't
people. I don't want people to miss what you just said.
So
I never knew that.
Public agencies, instead of having the settlement and judgment trust fund under the Comptroller's office, all public officials that finances these settlements, like the $40 million settlement, declared by HRD, the Human Resource Division of the state that screwed up, to the Comptroller's office, and having to disclose all the elements of that and the cost and how it had to get paid out, which then has to be approved by the legislature and enacted by the legislature, and then quarterly and at the end of the year disclosed in a report to the legislature. So the light is shined. Whereas the quasi-government agencies that are a little bit outside, and they don't all do this, but in the case of the Convention Center Authority, they buy discrimination insurance against themselves. So when a case comes forward, someone has a case, they settle it off to the side through the third party. Nothing to see here, folks. Next.
Nah.
Nobody knows about it. Not even their board.
So they continue to discriminate.
So it's a disgrace. That place needs reform. The quasi-public agencies need to be examined on how they use these practices, because the notion that you're saving money or doing anybody justice by using taxpayer dollars to finance an insurance plan to hide the misdeeds is outrageous. People should be outraged.
And that's the travesty as well, is that it's taxpayer funded discrimination insurance. I'm sure Trump will be buying that if he gets reelected to president. We got a caller on the line. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the round table. Caller, you there?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, Senator Collins. I heard so much about the support you've given to the People's Academy, and I just want to thank you so much.
Well, thank you. They're doing great work. We need to get more support for them.
Yes, and that's what I'm calling about. We have a group of citizens have provided a public letter to the City Council.
Caller, are you on a speaker? Because if you could take us off speaker. Yeah. And
okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
That's
better. Yes.
But I can't hear you. Oh, I should have it in my ear now. Okay. Hello?
Yeah, that's much better.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, we're here. Can you hear us?
I can't hear you now, so.
Can we, do we look?
Is there anything that we can do hello, are you here? Can you hear us now?
Yes, I am, but
okay.
When I took it off speaker, I couldn't hear you.
Okay.
So.
All right, so let's go with your question, because we've got some other calls we want to get to as well. All right.
Yes, so we are writing a public letter to the City Council and other officials to consider this a state of emergency for the 250 black people who have died in Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan, called the Murder Triangle. And we feel that these people could have worked and gone to school with the People's Academy because of a promise that Millennial Partners, specifically Captain McNeil and Joe Larkin, during the process of getting approved in 2018, went and visited the People's Academy, took documentary movies of the people, interacted with 30 families, and this is reported in the May 2018 article by the Business Boston Journal, that they promised diversity on the Winthrop Towers based on their funding the Pittsburgh Academy, to train black citizens to have jobs that would be apprenticeships. They'd be shovel ready for apprenticeships that would start at $60,000 to $80,000 the first year. That promise was made to T. Michaels, and the commissioners specifically approved Winthrop Towers based on that testimony of T. Michaels for People's Academy. After they took videos, everything, and you can read about it in the May 2018 article by Catherine Carlock. She was the business editor, and she stated that they visited the People's Academy, that McNeil and Larkin visited the People's Academy, interacted with 30 families, and after they were approved, they did not give one dime to People's Academy to train people. And Ed Flynn is going to look into that for us, but it's documented in the Business Boston Journal. But I'd like to just ask one quick question, and that is, when the GBH Paul Singer reported in a August 2023 article in GBH News, Paul Singer stated that there was no diversity, a little or none, on Winthrop Towers. And Kathleen McNeil and Joe Larkin stated that that was the union's fault. And we're saying that if they had funded the People's Academy, we would have saved the deaths of all those 250 people in Dorchester, Madison.
So we'll let the senator answer, and then we'll grab the other call.
But so I think the key point here is, so I'm sure you'll get support from the city council, and I think the best place to have them weigh in is at the neighborhood jobs trust level. That's a quarterly opportunity for nonprofits to seek funding for job training. But when it comes to these projects, the leverage is at the permitting level. And what we've done and ensured, because your tale is a tale, unfortunately, as old as time, unless you get the agency to change. And we have, but it requires advocacy, from the elected officials and also from the community, and, really not taking no for an answer, because when it happens that a project of that size, under the Article 80 of the zoning code, what's required is a community cooperation agreement. And that has to be approved by the same board that approves the permit. So promises unkept don't get unkept if it's in writing and if it's in the community cooperation agreement, which we have used to further solidify those commitments to organizations that we want to make sure have the resources to develop those pathways, not on a hope and a dream or a prayer, but they're on the ground. They have the access to the human capital and the equipped to do the job training. And so we've really dug in on making sure that all that is spelled out in the community cooperation agreement. Why? Because it's technically a covenant, a legally binding agreement that can be enforced. So what we want people to make sure they know at the community level is, don't go weigh in and support unless you see the commitment in the community cooperation agreement.
So
otherwise, sometimes a project may get sold, or the person who you're talking to leaves or moves on or even passes on, and then whatever was what used to be your word is your bond becomes, oh, geez, I forget, or I'm not that person who said that, or whatever. But that covenant that's in the community cooperation agreement cannot be ignored. Well, not only that, it can be legally enforced. So that's the key.
Senator, what it sounds like is what you were talking about earlier. Like, it sounds like these folks have bought some discriminatory insurance as well. It's just mind-boggling. Call it. Thank you.
Not getting pinned down is not unique, but to some of the practices. But that's why, on the other side, a body politic that is empowered by the people to make zoning decisions and changes that actually create value out of thin air for private interests. That process is key, because the questions need to be asked. Well, what's coming back to the community for the creation of value that we've, supported or have supported through this process where human beings are appointed to those seats. Not, there isn't a commandment coming down from the Lord Almighty. These are human beings that live among us, they're residents, they're neighbors, and they're there to make sure the process is intact, it is fair, that when those decisions get made, that all the stakeholders have been able to weigh in. And it's really important that when it becomes time to have that decision, that the community cooperation agreement includes all the elements and commitments that the community wants and deserves to have in there. Without that, there's no reason to go support it.
It's because, almost like
when you're going on faith, it should be enough. Well, but it's just not enough. So you have to have it in there. Otherwise,
one quick question.
Yeah, because we want to get to these other calls, but it also
the allocation that was made from the public benefit package with Millennium Partners, where they did distribute money to Boston Commons, Franklin Park, and Monecos. Was that written in a community agreement? How was that allocation made? How was that made?
And what you can do, you can find it probably around the same docs that are intact with those meeting minutes that you talked about. The community cooperation agreement is a public document, and that would have been approved by the same board in and around the same time. So it will be spelled out in there. And sometimes they go beyond or, in addition to what's in the cooperation agreement. But if there was a community cooperation agreement that had commitments in there, it'll be public, and you can see what was written into the community cooperation agreement, and if what you're suggesting was in there or not.
All right, thank you.
Could you find that information out for me, Senator Collins? Whether or not
I'm happy to share that with the folks here on the program. It's it won't take long. It should be a simple online search.
All right. Thank you, caller. We're going to grab these other calls. They're always saying that old saying, right? An oral agreement is worth the paper it's written on. And that's what it sounds like here, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't exist. I want to bring this other caller in. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the roundtable. Do you have a comment or question?
No, just like I've learned a lot this morning, like about the candidate forum, about the community, the lack of transparency, apparently, with the contract. Like, I know from the last person you had on, you guys had mentioned the fact that the details were sent through a private company that the former commissioner is ahead of. Is that was I hearing that correctly?
You were hearing it correctly. That he's going to cash in on the detail system, and that has been the plan all along.
Does he already make enough money with the retirement plan that he gets from the city?
Well, not as that, but all the other, his
no money
company.
is enough money. But I think what's happening here on that particular piece is that he has kind of carved out a little area. So people are talking about flag people, which I have my own issues with that. But in that particular situation, he is targeted as the provider of those services without going over the 30B law, which the council said has a certain criterion to meet.
So Senator, I want to pivot a little bit. It was discussed a little earlier in the conversation as well. We're having an influx of immigrants into the state, into the city here, and I know it's putting quite a strain on resources here. I know folks were literally living in the transportation building downtown there. Those folks, I saw the news this morning, they have been relocated. But how is the state handling this? Because it seems like quite an endeavor to deal with this influx of folks that are coming in numbers that we haven't seen.
Right. No, it's a good point. I mean, I think there's a couple of things driving that. There are some advocate groups that literally went down to the border and with a bullhorn and told everybody to come up to Massachusetts, which I guess can be a point of pride until you can't, respond. So, I got to give credit to the governor. I think she's handled it well. The previous administration didn't declare a state of emergency. Unfortunately, though, we put a lot of resources at the table, particularly due to not just the migrant crisis, but the crisis in Haiti after the assassination of the president. And there's a lot of, we have one of the largest Haitian American communities in the country. And I think because of that, folks saw, from the Haitian community, saw this is a place as a beacon to come with family and extended friends and family. So that had already been underway, but I think the previous administration didn't see the seriousness of how this could really expand and explode because of all the great things that Massachusetts does, including its entitlements and commitments to families in need. Our right to shelter law was written in the 80s with Governor Dukakis, and that was to respond to his decommissioning of the mental health hospitals, where people were finding themselves out and in the street, particularly with the federal government pulling back their resources in ways that were there before. So, it's an incredible commitment, but I think the interpretation of that and the way the governor's handled that has made it so people who want to change that law, which is really a red herring, would be, lost really the steam to push us to do that. Even though it's a fair debate, and we have to debate these things because it's a fair question about whether that is in the driver. But the governor is sending the right messages about our state not having unlimited resources and unlimited capacity, but also at the same time getting to the heart of the matter. And if you ask a lot of businesses around the city and state, you have people just not even showing up to work and not even telling anybody. Why? Because the power is in the amount of opportunities in the labor shortage. Mm-hmm. So knowing you probably won't even get terminated just for not showing up to work because you needed. I mean, I went to a supermarket last week. The only two people who were there was the owner and his daughter because everyone else just bailed.
Yeah.
So I think what we're seeing the governor's team do is that thousands of people trained by bringing the federal partners to make sure these folks get work permits as soon as possible. A lot of talented people who were otherwise be working menial jobs that can step up to the plate in the medical community, with our healthcare community really in need of, in terms of the nursing space, in terms of the personal care space. And so, I think getting those folks to work is going to be really important, and I think the focus. And that's where the administration has been focusing their time. Now, the housing piece is just sort of an added element to an already existing problem. Mm-hmm. And, we're really in need. I think that a state of emergency is allowing the governor and the executive branch to think about how we can get more housing online faster, which would otherwise take much more time. So the ability on the permitting across the state, it also allows the executive branch to move towards affordable housing faster in these suburban towns where they can take on the growth, because we've had these sort of these snob zoning practices of the past that Governor Baker tried to reform for communities within the T system. That if you want, to get better service, you have to, commit to your affordable housing and multifamily housing threshold,
right? Which
is incredibly important. So, I think that the governor is handling it as best she can, and that was a debate inside the legislature. Should we be forcing, the legislature be forcing the executive branch on executive functions? And I think maintaining the amount of flexibility is needed, and the ability under the declaration of emergency is allowing permitting to get done faster, or otherwise take longer, which I think is going to help us in our entirety of the housing crunch across the state, but also particularly here, in link that to the job market, and so folks have to understand too that the lion's share of people coming have TPS, temporarily protected status. They are here legally with respect to the United States government, because where they've come from has been designated as a country that is in turmoil, political, economic, and or related to safety, and in some cases all three. So if you take, for example, the Haitian community, folks that are here are not here legally, they're here with status, and automatically they'd be able to get a license, social security number, ability to work, and health care and academic benefits for their families. And so nothing that's happening right now is necessarily taking away from others. It is the crunch that we're already in and the shelter crisis, because we're not just seeing it in relation to folks in the city who are being challenged because of pricing, because of circumstances in their lives that have them in a rut. We have an epidemic as it relates to drugs. You talked about I think earlier the folks in Roxbury who have suffered at the hands of gun violence. I mean, 352 people died of a drug overdose last year. We need to shift the game on how we're dealing with that.
Right.
We need to have our trauma team respond to those like we do gun violence. Instead, we're letting people go to the hospital. EMS is bringing them to the hospital. They're being discharged to the street without treatment at all. 1,290 the first 6 months of the year. What happens to those folks?
Yeah.
They wander around the city, mentally ill and addicted, get victimized other people, until they're back in the hospital, back in the courtroom, back at a precinct.
Yeah, so
and that's, we're not talking about people who are going at their first rodeo. You're seeing people come to the emergency room who've overdosed 12 times, and there's no discrimination when it comes to that.
Right.
You've seen it at Mass and Cass. It's of all stripes and sizes, and that has to change. We need to be employing, not forcing the police, not forcing court officials, we need the trauma folks who are probably the best equipped social workers that have the strength in their stomach to make difficult decisions when they know someone is at risk. The physicians are unwilling to do it. They're too afraid for whatever reason. The police have too much to do. By the time they're in front of the court, that challenge is already escalated. So we need to do is shift how social workers are responding. Don't put them out on the street in harm's way. People who have knives on them and are all whacked out on meth, tranquilizers, heroin, fentanyl. You can't negotiate with someone in that state of mind. But if they're in the hospital, brought by the taxpayers, because EMS, BPD, BFD has showed up to save their life, don't discharge them without treatment. Yeah. Give them the chance to make that decision themselves. Use your diplomatic skills. But if they say no, and it's certain death, whether it's this week, next week, thereafter, intervene under Section 35, Chapter 123, and commit them to treatment. So in this supplemental budget, along with the settlement and other items, including collective bargaining agreements, important investments in our shelter system, and special education, what we did was not just assign funding to the Department of Mental Health, but allow their court clinicians who have an office at the courthouse to show up at the hospital, or even, be stationed there, and at least do their evaluation at the hospital. So you don't have to shackle somebody who needs treatment and drag them up to the courthouse for that evaluation. One of the scariest parts of this is, though there's 1,290 people discharged, we only had 108 petitions under Section 35, and 102 of them were family.
Wow.
Most people don't have family in their life down there.
Right.
So if we're not finding a way for the government to intervene like they do with victims of trauma and violence when it comes to gun violence, I'm not saying reinvent the wheel. Yeah. Use your best practices.
Right. So,
the best in the business.
We got to sneak in a call because the lines are loaded here. The folks are interested in what you're saying, and it's very informative. We've got a few more questions and not a lot of time. So, apologize for interrupting you. Caller, you have a question or comment for the senator?
Hey, Larry. How are you doing, my brother? How you doing?
Hey, Dr. come on, Cliff.
I'm doing very well. Thank you, sir.
I'm good. Okay, I keep hearing about the Haitian migrants. But what about us, the Central American migrants that's trying to come over here and seek asylum? Because, like, the triangle, like Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, are all violent. I don't hear anything from the governor saying, oh, well, we're going to help people from Central America. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. All those countries are covered under TPS. So those folks I use that as an example because, it's the largest immigrant community in Boston, the Haitian community.
What
the
is
largest
CPS?
immigrant community in Boston.
What is
but,
CPS?
The communities of the countries of El Salvador, of Honduras, you're absolutely right. And the federal government agrees with you. So the folks that are coming here from those countries are in the same boat. They are
Senator. Could you
status, and the ability for them to get access to all those services are the same.
Senator, could you just explain to folks what CPS is, what the breakdown, what that means?
It's temporary protective status.
Okay.
It's an important designation that the federal government gives people from countries that are on their list. And I'll just pull the list up. It's searchable online. If you Google, or search, I should say, I don't want to give any extra oxygen to Google. If you look up Homeland Security, EPS, it'll list the countries, and those are all on there that you just described because of the circumstances that are going on at the government level or other countries. Here they are: Afghanistan, Burma, Cameroon, El Salvador, Ethiopia, Haiti, Honduras, Nepal, Nicaragua, Somalia, South Sudan, Syria, Ukraine, Venezuela, Yemen. So all those countries are designated for TPS. So folks that come from those countries,
right? So I guess
up through. Sorry, again.
No, I'm saying because it sounds like it really is. If you get here, you can get assistance, but we're not providing help for folks to come here, right? It's like
right. I mean, that's not necessarily our obligation, because we're not, unless there's an intervention by the federal government,
right?
Like in the case of Afghanistan and Ukraine, I think. In these other cases, I imagine if there's a conflict that is part of the equation that the United States is involved in, that can happen. Like in the case of Haiti, only recently was the United States involved because there has been in the other countries as well. I'm very proud that my former congressman, the late Joe Moakley, was part of the reform of what led to the Civil War and the manipulation of American resources down in El Salvador. So folks have been coming from El Salvador for a very long time. But to your point, that they're as eligible as any of these other countries, of folks coming from these countries for the services. The government is doing the best they can, and they brought Homeland Security up here to get people processed. And that's sort of the bottleneck right now, is getting folks processed because, it's not a traditional immigration process. And here's what we need to do in the federal government, and they're looking at to change. I know that others have really put forth legislation, including Senator Warren, on this. Right now, we have TPS, which is a temporary protective status, and the current law says you have to go back to your country of origin to come back with inspection, which means through their immigration to ours, which is impossible because you're not going back to these places that are in such turmoil. That would put you in risk and in danger. So what they're trying to do is reform that so you don't have to go back to the country of origin to start the process to get to the next step, which is green card or permanent residency. Because once you're in that level, the sort of the second tier, you are on the pathway to get citizenship. It may take you some time, but you're on a pathway. There's no temporary status. The temporary protective status continues to get extended, but it can keep people sometime in what can feel like perpetual limbo. And that's the challenge that we face in our immigration system, is even though we have these countries designated and people are here and they don't have to go anywhere, they're always waiting for that end date to hopefully get extended. And instead of reforming the immigration law and system to allow for people to take that next step to get to permanent residency and green card status, without having to go back to the country of origin that's in turmoil. So that's where this bottleneck is as it relates to the long-term process for even short-term for citizenship, which so many people are wanting.
So, Senator,
that's at a federal level and another conversation. But as it relates to the folks and the people you're talking about, they're here and they're here legally. They're able to access the same benefits as the Haitian community,
So what I'm kind of hearing, and Cliff, you probably know better than I, and maybe everyone, geographically, it really kind of depends on where you are in your proximity to the states. If you have easier access to get here, but those folks that you listed, Senator, are eligible for the TPS if they can get here, but geographically, like if you're in Mexico, it's easier to get to you. And Mexico's not listed on there as one of the countries.
Right. Well, because they're, I mean, they wouldn't have temporary protective status. So
Right.
They would be here illegally if they didn't come through a real immigration process.
Right.
In other countries that are not on this list.
Right.
So, that's the challenge. If the country is in turmoil, we just listed all those that are currently designated, including as it relates to Central and South America. We have El Salvador, we have Honduras, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. Given the circumstances in those nations, that's different than some of the others that are not as destabilized. So that's the difference.
Right.
And they're coming. A lot of folks are being flown up here, and some of these other governors are paying for it with their states. They're literally sending people via plane, JetBlue to Logan.
Right. We're seeing that.
The struggle to get to the border for them is one thing, but you're seeing these other states. The government's really paying for flights to get people to other places in the country. But I think the governor has really, make sure that everybody understands that we don't have an unlimited amount of resources and ability to respond to that.
No, we don't. It's not endless, and there's a price whether people, it's real taxpayer. So Cliff, does that were you surprised that Honduras was on that list?
Yeah, I'm surprised because usually we've never been talked about before.
See, this is why we're here to inform you. see.
All right, thank you, Larry.
Oh, okay,
you're
welcome. We're here to.
You're welcome.
So, Senator, we only have a few minutes. I just wanted to find out from you what is upcoming in the new legislation on the new session of the Senate of the State House there. Anything you want to share with our listening audience as to when the new session starts up that you guys are going to be tackling?
Yeah, so we do have, and it's an interesting segue. So while we have stashed away a lot of resources in our rainy day fund, which we may need to be tapping in the new year, our receipts are not as high. We'll see what comes in through the holiday season. Will let us know what the second wave will be in the second half of our fiscal year, because we go July 1st to June 30th, and what that means for our next year budget. So that's going to be key. We just had our status of revenues hearing, and that really, identifies trends, because we do our budget based off of prospective earnings, and so in the new year we're going to know how far off we are and what the governor may have to do with respect to 9C cuts, which means, take out the red pen and start shaving back on some of the budget commitments that we've made. So we're hoping not to have that happen. We'll also see a new budget being put forward by the administration, which will be submitted to the governor in the first quarter, and begin hearings on that.
But I think
we're going to have some time.
No, I said I think because you said it's always the unexpected, right? I think there was a huge hit to the budget with this immigration issue that was not budgeted initially, right? And so going forward, I'm sure that's going to have to take in, but that also comes from somewhere, because at some point, like I said, it's not unlimited resources. People think about $50+ billion. That's paying, a lot of that is coming from taxes, and when you talk about raising taxes or fees, because a fee is a tax. Okay, how you put lipstick on the pig, people have to absorb that.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's going to be the challenge, that we have to really be sure that we're not weakening or shortchanging our other values and commitments. And because we were fiscally prudent, we have the ability to at least take on the hit up front here, but it's not, we can't sustain it forever. So that's really what we're going to be focused on our finances. But we have reforms to make, and we're going to be taking a look at that through hearings in the new year that people should be aware of. But we're going to be getting to the second year in our formal session, and so what will happen in February is the legislation that's going to have a shot to be passed will happen most likely in February, discharged from the original committees, and by April we'll really know what is going to be in the real priority set to debate through the end of July when we break formally. And so, that's going to be important for folks to weigh in with their local legislators on what their priorities are, what they want to see happen, top priorities, because That's it. We have tens of thousands of bills filed, and so we have to prioritize.
Right. So, Senator,
some of them are good ideas, some of them aren't, so they won't make it.
Right.
And even some of the good ideas won't make it just because of the sheer volume.
Right. Any
unless there's noise.
Right. Any talk of consolidation of any of the, I know we've got about 2 minutes. Any talk of consolidation of some of these state agencies? Because I'm sure there's some redundancy that maybe we could, just like civil service has now basically been gutted to where it's saying it really has no usefulness, and with the oversight of the post now, there's the question, and then the court's ruling on the exams and everything. Do we really need civil service in its operation? Is that something that we need to continue to fund, and it's dysfunctional?